The story of the man with the twisted lip from Sherlock Holmes. Isa Whitney, the brother of Elias Whitney, the headmaster of St. George's Divinity School, was a man who had fallen into the depths of opium addiction. It appeared that during his school days he had been influenced by De Quincey's vivid depictions of dreams and emotions, and in a foolish bout of madness had attempted to experience the same sensations by soaking tobacco and opium spirit and smoking it, thus becoming an addict. Like others of his kind, he had acquired the habit with alarming ease but found it impossible to abandon, and his condition inspired in those around him a mixture of pity and fear. His yellowed, withered complexion, his eyelids that he could scarcely keep open, and his pupils shrunk to pinpoints as he lay collapsed in a chair are images that still remain vivid before my eyes. One night in June of 1889, there came a sudden knock at my door. It was at one of those hours when people begin to yawn and glance at the clock. As I rose from my chair, my wife set aside the work in her lap and frowned. "There must be another patient," she said. "They're calling you out again." Having only just returned home after an exhausting day, I muttered my displeasure. After the sound of the door opening, we heard hurried words spoken in haste, followed by quick footsteps on the floorboards. The door was flung wide open, and a woman dressed in dark clothes, her face veiled, rushed into the room. "I am sorry to come at such an hour," she said, and then, unable to restrain herself, threw her arms around my wife's neck and burst into tears. "I am in terrible distress," she cried. "I need your help." My wife lifted the veil from the woman's face. "Why, it's Kate Whitney," she exclaimed. "You startled me, Kate. I truly didn't recognize you." I didn't know what else to do, so I came straight here. It was always thus. Anyone with troubles treated my wife as a wall to weep against. "You did the right thing. Sit down and have a little wine and water. Compose yourself, then you can tell us everything. If you wish, James can retire to the bedroom and leave us alone." "Oh, no. I need the doctor's help and advice as well. He hasn't come home for 2 days. I am terribly worried." As a doctor, I was no stranger to hearing of her husband's troubles, and my wife, being Kate's friend since school days, often heard about them too. We did our best to calm her. Did she know where her husband was? Could we bring him back? It appeared that we could. She was convinced that whenever her husband suffered an opium relapse, he resorted to an opium den in the East End of London. Until now, his indulgences had never lasted more than a day, and by evening he would stagger home in a miserable state. This time, however, he had been missing for 48 hours, and she feared that he was either among the dockside ruffians smoking poison or lying insensible under its effects. She was certain that he was at the Golden Bar on Upper Swanham Lane, but what could she do? How could a young and timid woman push her way through a den of ruffians to drag her husband out of such a pit? The situation was clear, and so was the course of action. Could I not go there with her? Or rather, if I were to go anyway, why should she come at all? After all, I was Isa Whitney's doctor, and he listened to me. It was better that I should go alone. I promised her that if her husband was indeed at the address she gave, I would have him sent home by carriage within 2 hours. Rising from my comfortable chair by the fireplace, I set out. 10 minutes later, I was galloping eastward in a 2-horse cab, about to undertake a most curious errand, though I was as yet unaware of the strange events that awaited me. Finding the place was no difficulty. Upper Swanham Lane lay behind the high wharves east of London Bridge and north of the river, a sinister thoroughfare indeed. The cave-like entrance to the opium den was reached by descending a steep flight of steps between a feed shop and a tavern. After telling the cabman to wait, I made my way down the worn steps, polished smooth by the feet of countless drunkards, and by the flickering light of a lamp found the latch and entered a long, narrow room. Brown opium smoke filled the air, and wooden bunks lining the walls gave the place the appearance of a ship's dormitory. In the dim light, I could make out men lying in strange postures, heads bowed, knees drawn up, chins thrust skyward, watching new arrivals with dull eyes. As the smokers drew on their poison-filled pipes, small red glows appeared and vanished among the black shadows. Most lay silently. Some muttered to themselves. Others conversed in low, monotonous voices. Their exchanges were intermittent and scarcely conversational at all. Each man spoke to himself, indifferent to what the other said. At the far end of the room, beside a brazier filled with glowing coals, an elderly, tall, gaunt man sat on a three-legged stool, elbows on knees, chin in hands, gazing into the fire. A pale-faced Malay attendant, seeing me enter, pointed to an empty bunk and offered me a prepared pipe. "Thank you, but I shan't be staying long," I said. "My friend Isa Whitney is here. I have come to speak with him." There was a movement to my right, followed by a cry. With difficulty, I made out Whitney's pale, exhausted, and wretched face staring at me. "My God, it's Watson," he exclaimed. He was pitiful to behold, trembling with excitement. "Tell me, Watson, what time is it?" "Nearly 11. What day is it?" "Friday, June the 19th. "Good heavens! I thought it was Wednesday." "It is Wednesday, isn't it? You're trying to frighten me." He buried his face in his arms and began to sob hysterically. "It's Friday, my friend. Your wife has been waiting for you for 2 days. You should be ashamed of yourself." "You're right, but you're mistaken, Watson. I've only been here a few hours. I smoked 3 or 4 pipes, perhaps more. I can't remember. But I'll come home with you. I mustn't upset poor Kate any longer." "Did you come by carriage?" "Yes, it's waiting outside." "Then let's go at once." "But the bill must be paid, and I'm not in a position to do so. Would you pay it for me?" I made my way through the sleepers and the stupefying fumes, trying not to inhale too deeply, in search of the proprietor. As I passed the tall man by the brazier, I felt my coat tugged and heard a low voice say, "Pass by me, then turn and look back." The words were so clear that no one but the old man beside me could have spoken. Yet he sat utterly indifferent, his bent back and skinny fingers barely holding an opium pipe. After taking 2 steps, I turned. I scarcely restrained a cry of astonishment. The old man had turned his back so that none could see his face. His body straightened. The wrinkles vanished. Light returned to his eyes. The man sitting by the fire, grinning at me, was none other than my friend Sherlock Holmes. With a slight gesture, he motioned me closer, then turned his face again toward the room and resumed the posture of a bent old man. "Holmes, what are you doing here?" I whispered. "Speak as softly as possible," he replied. "My ears are very sharp. If you can rid yourself of your drunken companion, we may have a pleasant conversation. There's a carriage waiting outside. Then put your friend in it. There's nothing to fear. He's in no condition to cause trouble. If you send word to your wife through the cabman that you're with me, there will be no difficulty. Wait outside. I'll join you in 5 minutes." Sherlock Holmes's wishes were always so unmistakable that resistance was impossible. Once I had put Whitney into the carriage, my duty would be complete, and I could then embark upon yet another of my friend's curious adventures. Within minutes, I had written a note to my wife, paid Whitney's bill, placed him in the cab, and watched it drive away. Shortly afterward, a ragged figure emerged from the den and joined me. Holmes continued to limp and stoop for 2 streets. Then, satisfied that we were far enough away, he straightened and burst into hearty laughter. "You must have thought, Watson," he said, "after my little weakness for cocaine, which you try so hard to keep me from, that I had taken up opium as well. I was certainly surprised to see you there. You couldn't have been more surprised than I was. I was looking for a friend, and I was hunting an enemy." "An enemy?" "Yes, one of my natural enemies. Or, to put it another way, my natural prey. In short, I am on the track of a quarry, and I hoped, as I have before, to glean a clue from the incoherent ramblings of these drunkards. But had I been recognized, I would not have left that place alive, for the villain Lasker, who runs the den, has sworn revenge upon me. There is a secret door opening on a St. Paul's wharf, and strange things happen there on dark nights. You mean murder? Yes, Watson murder. If we were paid £1,000 for every wealthy man killed in that den, we should both be rich. It is the foulest death trap on the riverbank, and I fear that Neville St. Clair entered it and never emerged. Never mind, the carriage must be somewhere around here. He put 2 fingers between his lips and gave a sharp whistle, which was answered in the same manner from a distance. Then came the sound of wheels and hoofs. As the carriage approached us, cutting through the darkness with the yellow glow of its lamps, Holmes asked, "Are you coming with me or not?" "If I can be of any use, I'll come." A trustworthy friend is always useful, and having someone to write down what we experience is no bad thing either. There are 2 beds in my room at the Cedars. The Cedars? Yes, I am referring to Mr. St. Clair's house. I am conducting the investigation there. Where is this house? Near Lee in Kent, about 11 kilometers from here. But I know nothing about this case. Of course you don't. Come along. I'll tell you about it on the way. Very well, John. We'll take care of things from here. Take this money and look after yourself. Don't forget to come tomorrow at 11. With a crack of the whip, we sped rapidly through the deserted and gloomy streets. Gradually, we emerged into broader roads and finally reached a wide, railed bridge spanning a murky, slow-moving river. Before us stretched another mass of brick and mortar. The only sounds breaking the silence were the occasional footsteps of policemen and the muttered songs of tipsy men returning home late. Pale clouds drifted slowly across the sky, and through the gaps between them, I could occasionally make out a few stars winking at us. Holmes, however, drove on with his head bent forward, not uttering a single word. I sat beside him, wondering what sort of case could tax my friend's abilities so severely and what he was truly after, yet I dared not disturb him by asking questions. We had already covered several kilometers and were approaching the outskirts of the city, with its suburban houses, when Sherlock Holmes suddenly shook himself, lit his pipe with the air of a man doing his utmost, and spoke. "You possess an extraordinary ability to remain silent, Watson," he said. "It makes you an excellent companion. Good Lord, having someone to talk to is truly a blessing, for my mind is full of thoughts. I hardly know what to say to the poor woman who will meet me at the door. You seem to forget that I know nothing about the case. You will know it all before we reach Lee. It appears extremely simple, yet I do not have a single clue to follow. If I could only get hold of the end of the string, the rest would unravel at once, but I cannot manage it. Now let me explain the case to you briefly and clearly. Watson, perhaps where I see only darkness, you may perceive a spark. I am Listenin Kropka. Several years ago, in March of 1884, a gentleman by the name of Neville St. Clair, apparently a man of considerable means, came to Lee. He purchased a large villa there, furnished it well, and lived comfortably. Gradually, he established a social circle and, in 1887, married the daughter of a local brewer. They had 2 children. He had no regular occupation, but had interests in several companies, and every morning he went down to the city regularly, returning just as regularly every evening at precisely 5:14 from Cannon Street. Now 37 years old, Mr. St. Clair is a quiet, well-mannered man, a good husband, a loving father, and well-liked by all who know him. As far as we can determine at present, although he has debts amounting to £88.10, he has £220 in his account at the Capital and Counties Bank. There is therefore no reason to suppose that financial worries were troubling him. Last Monday, Mr. Neville St. Clair went into the city earlier than usual. As he left home, He told his wife that he had two important matters to attend to and promised his young son that he would bring him a box of toy bricks. Shortly after his departure, a telegram arrived for his wife by what seemed a fortunate coincidence. The telegram stated that a valuable package addressed to her was awaiting collection at the Aberdeen Shipping Company. If you know London well, you will realize that this company is located on Fresno Street, which leads into Upper Swamdam Road, the very place where you encounter me tonight. After dinner, Mrs. St. Clair went into the city, did a little shopping, and then went to the company to collect her package. At exactly 4:35, she was in Swamdam Street and was making her way toward the station to return home. So far, everything is clear, isn't it? Perfectly. You may also remember that the weather that Monday was extremely hot. Mrs. St. Clair was walking slowly and looking about in hopes of finding an empty cab, as she disliked the neighborhood. As she proceeded down Swamdam Road in this manner, she suddenly heard a cry or scream. Looking up, she was struck with amazement to see her husband staring down at her. According to her statement, the man was signaling to her from a second-floor window. The window was open, and she saw her husband's face clearly. She says his expression was one of extreme agitation, and that he waved to her frantically before suddenly disappearing from view, as though some irresistible force had seized him from behind. With a woman's quick eye, Mrs. St. Clair immediately noticed that although her husband was wearing the dark overcoat he had left home in, he had neither tie nor collar on. Convinced that something was terribly wrong, she rushed to the stairs. The building in question was the very opium den we encountered earlier this evening. She ran through the front room and attempted to ascend the stairs, but there she was confronted by the Lascar ruffian I mentioned, who, with the help of a Danish man, prevented her from going up and forcibly pushed her back into the street. With dreadful suspicions in her mind, the woman ran down the road and, by a stroke of good fortune, encountered police officers and an inspector who were on patrol in Fresno Street. She returned with two constables and the inspector, and despite the objections of the proprietor, they entered the room where Mr. St. Clair had last been seen. There was, however, no trace of him. The only person found upstairs was a wretched, crippled man lying on the floor. This ragged fellow appeared to be a beggar who had taken up residence there. Both the beggar and the Lascar swore solemnly that no one had entered the street-facing room that afternoon. Their statements were so convincing that the inspector was on the point of leaving the room, persuaded that Mrs. St. Clair had imagined the entire affair, when the woman suddenly screamed and threw herself at the lid of a small box on the table. The lid flew open, spilling a heap of toy bricks. These were the toys Mr. St. Clair had promised his son. This discovery, combined with the beggar's contradictory behavior, convinced the inspector that the matter was serious. The rooms of the opium den were carefully searched, and what was found suggested that a terrible crime had been committed. The room facing the street was furnished simply as a sitting room and opened into a small bedroom overlooking the wharves. Between the wharf and the bedroom window was a narrow strip of ground that was dry at low tide, but filled with water up to 1.5 meters deep when the tide was high. The bedroom had a large window that opened from below. Upon examination, bloodstains were found on the window ledge, and drops of blood were discovered on the wooden floor of the room. Behind one of the curtains in the street-facing room were found all of Mr. Neville St. Clair's clothes, except his overcoat. His boots, socks, hat, and watch are all there. There were no signs of violence on the clothes, nor any further trace of Mr. St. Clair. Since there was no other exit from the room, he must have left through the back window. Yet, judging by the blood on the window ledge, it was unlikely that he escaped by swimming, especially as the tide was at its highest that day. Now, let us consider the villains involved. The Lascar is known to have a long criminal record, but according to Mrs. St. Clair's account, he was already at the foot of the stairs only seconds after Mr. St. Clair appeared at the window. At most, therefore, he could have been an accessory. In his statement, he claimed to know nothing, said he had no idea what Hugh Boone, the man staying in the room, might have done, and professed ignorance as to how the missing man's clothes came to be there. That is enough about the Lascar. As for the sinister cripple living upstairs in the opium den, there is no doubt that he was the last person to see Mr. Neville St. Clair. His name is Hugh Boone, and anyone who frequents the city center recognizes his loathsome face. He is a professional beggar, though he pretends to have a legitimate occupation to avoid trouble with the police. You may have noticed that slight curve in the wall on the left side of the street, just below Threadneedle Street. That is his usual spot. Every day, he sits there cross-legged with a few packets of matches in his lap. Thanks to his pitiful appearance, people constantly toss coins into the filthy leather hat placed beside him. I observed him several times before this incident and was amazed at the amount he collected in a short time. His appearance is unforgettable. Bright orange hair, a hideously scarred face, an upper lip that curls upward at the corners, a bulldog-like jaw, and piercing black eyes that contrast sharply with his hair. He is also remarkably quick-witted, always ready with a sharp retort for anyone who addresses him. This is the man who lived upstairs in the opium den and who was the last to see the man we seek. But the man is a cripple. I protested. What could a man who can use only one arm do to someone in the prime of life? Cripple is not quite accurate. The man merely limps on one leg. Otherwise, he appears strong and well-built. As a doctor, you know better than I do, Watson, that when a man has one weak limb, the others often develop exceptional strength to compensate. Please go on. When Mrs. St. Clair saw the blood at the window, she fainted and was taken home in a carriage by the police, as her presence served only to hinder the investigation. Inspector Barton searched the building thoroughly, but found nothing to shed further light on the case. However, he made the mistake of not arresting Boone immediately, giving him several minutes during which he may well have spoken with his friend the Lascar. The error was quickly corrected, and Boone was arrested and searched. Nothing was found on him to prove his guilt, except bloodstains on the right sleeve of his shirt. He immediately showed that his ring finger had been cut near the nail and claimed the blood came from there, adding that he had recently gone to the window and that the blood found there was also his own. He categorically denied having seen Mr. Neville St. Clair and claimed to be just as astonished as the police at finding the man's clothes in his room. Despite his loud protests, he was taken to the station. The inspector remained in the building, hoping to find further clues once the tide receded. He was successful in this, and when the water withdrew, he found exactly what he had feared to find among the mud. They did not find Neville St. Clair, but his overcoat was lying there. Can you guess what was found in his pockets? I can't imagine. I didn't expect you to. The pockets of the coat were filled to the brim with coins, 421 pennies and 270 halfpennies. It is no wonder that the coat had not been swept away once the tide receded. The same, however, could hardly be said of a human body. There is a powerful eddy between the wharf and the house. It is quite possible that the weight of the coat caused it to remain in place, while the man's naked body was carried off by the river. But since the rest of his clothes were found in the room, does that mean he was wearing only his overcoat? No, sir, but the evidence may be misleading. If we assume that Boone pushed Neville St. Clair out of the window, it is unlikely that anyone would have witnessed it. The first thought of someone committing such an act would be to dispose of anything that could identify him, namely the victim's clothes. He may have taken the coat, but feared that it would float if thrown directly into the water. Hearing the commotion below, and knowing the woman would soon rush upstairs, he may have felt pressed for time. Perhaps he heard from his accomplice, the Lascar, that the police were already moving about the street. He had no time to waste. He ran to his secret hiding place where he kept his begging earnings, filled the coat pockets with coins to make it sink, and threw it out the window. He intended to do the same with the other clothes, but upon hearing approaching footsteps, all he managed to do before the police arrived was to shut the window. That seems a plausible explanation. In the absence of a better theory, we must provisionally accept it. As I told you, Boone was arrested and taken to the station, but no previous crimes have been traced to him. Although he has long made begging his profession, he appears to have lived a quiet life without criminal involvement. Now we must answer these questions. What was Neville St. Clair doing in the opium den? What happened to him? Where is he now? And what role did Hugh Boone play in his disappearance? All these questions remain unanswered. Of all the cases I have encountered, I have never seen one that appeared so simple at first glance and yet proved so utterly insoluble. As Sherlock Holmes finished this strange story, our carriage had already left London behind, passed along winding roads and scattered houses, and finally reached a country lane bordered by hedges on both sides. As soon as the tale ended, we passed through two small villages where flickering lights shone from few windows. "We have reached the slope of Lee," said my friend. On this short journey, we passed through Middlesex, Surrey, and Kent. "Do you see that light among the trees? That is the cedars." I have no doubt that the sensitive ears of the anxious woman sitting by the lamp have already caught the sound of our horses' hooves. "Why are you not working on this case from your home in Baker Street?" "Because there is much research to be done here. Mrs. St. Clair kindly placed 2 rooms at my disposal, and I am sure she will be pleased to see me return with a friend and partner. Still, Watson, I hardly know how I can face her. What shall I say when she asks about her husband? There we are. Who? We drew up before the large villa on the grounds. A groom ran up and took the horse. I followed Holmes along the winding gravel path leading to the house. As we approached, the door suddenly opened, and a small, fair-haired woman appeared. A silk shawl was draped over her shoulders, and pink chiffon adorned her neck and wrists. One hand rested on the door, while the other was raised excitedly. She leaned slightly forward, craning her neck, her lips parted as she gazed at us with anxious eyes. He cried out, though she uttered a scream when she saw that there were 2 of us. When my friend shook his head and shrugged his shoulders in negation, the woman's scream subsided of its own accord into a low mutter. "Is it no good news?" "No." "Then perhaps bad news?" "None. Thank heaven for that, at least." "Come, you have had a long day and must be tired. This is my friend Watson. He has been of great service to me in many cases." We met by chance, and he was thus able to take part in this investigation. Pressing her hand warmly upon mine, she said, "I am very pleased to see you. I hope you will excuse any shortcomings in our hospitality, considering the trouble we are in." "I'm an old soldier, madam," I replied, "and even if I were not, I should hardly be inclined to notice such things in circumstances like these. If I can be of any service to you or my friend, that will be quite enough for me." As we entered the bright dining room, where cold dishes were laid out upon the table awaiting us, the young woman said, "I wish to ask you a few simple questions, Mr. Holmes, and I would ask that your answers be equally simple and direct." "Certainly, madam. Do not concern yourself with how I may feel. I am neither hysterical nor prone to fainting. All I wish to hear is your plain and honest opinion." "On what subject? Tell me with all your heart. Do you believe that Neville is alive?" Sherlock Holmes looked almost ashamed. "Answer me honestly and at once," the woman insisted. Standing upon the carpet, she gazed intently at Holmes, who was leaning back in his wicker chair. "Then I must honestly tell you no. You believe him to be dead?" "Yes." "Do you think he was murdered?" "I'm not certain. Possibly." "On what day did he die?" "Monday." "Then, Mr. Holmes, How do you explain the fact that I received a letter from my husband today? I should like you to explain that, if you please. Sherlock Holmes sprang from his chair as though he had received an electric shock. What? He shouted. Yes, today. The woman smiled and held up a slip of paper. May I see it? Of course. Holmes snatched the paper from her hand, spread it out upon the table, and examined it carefully under the light of the lamp. I had risen from my chair as well and was peering over my friend's shoulder. The envelope was a large one, and, judging from the postmark, it had been posted that day, or rather, since it was now well past midnight, we might say yesterday, at Gravesend. It is not written neatly, Holmes murmured. The writing on the envelope cannot be your husband's, madam. It is not, but the writing inside is his. And it is also clear that the person who addressed the envelope paused in his writing in order to look up your address. How can you tell? You see that your name is black. That indicates that the ink dried naturally. The address, however, is gray, which shows that it was blotted with blotting paper after being written. If the entire inscription had been written and dried at the same time, it would all be gray. The writer wrote your name first and then had to pause before writing the address. That means he did not know your address. It is a small detail, but small details are everything. Now, let us look inside the envelope. There is something here. Yes, my husband's signet ring. Are you certain that this is his handwriting? Yes, one of his styles of writing. One of his styles? When he writes in haste, this is how he writes. It is very different from his usual hand, but I know it well. Do not be afraid, my dear. Everything will be all right. I have an important matter to put in order, and it will take some time. Please wait patiently. Neville. It is written in pencil on a blank page torn from the back of a book. The book was octavo in size. There is no trace of water on the paper. It was posted today from Gravesend. The man who sealed the envelope had a dirty thumb, and if I am not mistaken, the person who sealed it chews tobacco. You are quite certain that this letter was written in your husband's hand? Absolutely. Neville wrote this. The letter was posted today from Gravesend. The clouds are slowly beginning to clear, but I cannot yet say that the danger has passed. But my husband must be alive, Mr. Holmes. If this is not a cleverly devised attempt to mislead us, then you are right. However, the ring proves nothing, since it may have been removed from your husband's finger by some means. No. The handwriting in the letter is unquestionably his. That may be so, but it is also possible that the letter was written on Monday and posted today. You are right. In that case, many things may have happened in the interval. You must not drive me to despair, Mr. Holmes. There is a very strong emotional bond between us, and if anything dreadful had happened to him, I would surely have felt it. On the day he cut his hand in the bedroom, I was in the dining room, yet I sensed that something had happened and immediately ran upstairs. Is it possible that a woman who can sense such a small thing would remain unaware of her husband's death? I have seen many instances in which a woman's instincts were far more accurate than conclusions drawn by logical reasoning. This letter supports your view. But if your husband is alive, why does he not come home? I do not know. I cannot even imagine a reason. Did he say anything to you when he left the house on Monday? No. You must have been surprised when you saw your husband on Swam Dam Road. Very much so. Was the window open? Yes. Then it is possible that he called out to you. It is possible. As I understand it, he uttered only a faint cry. Yes. And you thought he was calling for help? Yes. He gestured to me with his hand, but he may have cried out in surprise. And the raising of his hand might have been due to his astonishment at seeing you when he did not expect you. Is that not possible? That is also possible. Why did you think he was pulled back? Because he vanished so suddenly from sight. He may have drawn back of his own accord. Did you see anyone else in the room? No, but that dreadful man admitted that he was there. and Lasker was at the foot of the stairs. Indeed, your husband was wearing his usual clothes. As far as you could see, was he not? Yes, but he had no collar or tie. I distinctly saw that his throat was bare. Had he ever spoken to you before about Swamdam Road? Never. And had you ever suspected him of using opium? Certainly not. Thank you, Mrs. St. Clair. Those were the important points I wish to clarify. Now, let us have a little supper and go to bed, for we shall have much to do tomorrow. A large and comfortable room was set aside for us. After the adventurous night I had experienced, I was so weary that I went straight to bed. Holmes, however, when faced with a problem to be solved, would often go for days, sometimes even a week, without sleep, turning the matter over and over in his mind until he either solved it or convinced himself that it could not be solved with the information at hand. It was not long before I realized that he intended to spend the night awake. Removing his coat and waistcoat, he put on a wide blue dressing gown, then went about the room gathering all the cushions and pillows from the chairs and sofas to construct a sort of oriental corner for himself. Taking a generous supply of tobacco and a box of matches, he sat down cross-legged. By the weak light of the lamp, I could see my friend with his pipe in his mouth, his eyes fixed upon the corner of the ceiling. As blue smoke curled silently upward from his old wooden pipe, the lamplight cast sharp shadows that accentuated the keen lines of his face. When I fell asleep, he was in that very position, and when he awoke me with a sudden cry, he was still in it. But now the summer sun was streaming into the room. His pipe was still between his lips, though the mound of tobacco that had stood beside him when I went to bed was gone. The smoke-stained ceiling, with its curling blue haze, gave sufficient indication of the tobacco's fate. "Awake, Watson?" he asked. "Yes. Are you ready for a morning journey?" "Certainly." "Then dress at once. No one is up yet, but I know where the groom sleeps. He will have the carriage ready shortly." As he spoke, he chuckled softly, his eyes shining. There was no trace left of the sorrowful, brooding man of the previous evening. While dressing, I glanced at my watch. It was hardly surprising that no one was awake yet. It was only 25 past 4. Just as I had finished dressing, Holmes came in to say that the groom was harnessing the horse. "I wish to test a small theory of mine," he said as he pulled on his boots. "I believe that one of the greatest fools in Europe is standing before you at this moment, Watson. I ought to be kicked all the way from here to Charing Cross. But I think I have now found the key that will solve this case." "Where is this key?" I asked with a smile. "In the bathroom," he replied. Seeing the doubtful look on my face, he continued, "I am not joking. I am perfectly serious. I was in the bathroom just now, and we have put the key into this bag. Come, my friend. Let's go and see whether our key will fit the lock." We descended to the ground floor as quietly as possible and stepped out into the morning sunshine. The groom, not yet fully dressed, was waiting for us beside the carriage and horse. We sprang in at once and set off toward London. A few country folk were driving carts loaded with vegetables toward the city, but apart from that, the village houses lining the road on either side lay silent and motionless like a town in a dream. In some respects, it was a unique case, Holmes said as he urged the horses into a gallop. "I can hardly believe how blind I was, but better late than never." As we passed through the streets of Surrey, early risers were beginning to peer sleepily from their windows. After crossing Waterloo Bridge Road and then the river, we flew down Wellington Street and reached Bow Street on our right. The policeman knew Sherlock Holmes well, and the two officers at the door greeted him. One of them held the horse's head while the other ushered us inside. "Who is on duty?" Holmes asked. "Inspector Bradstreet, sir." "Ah, Bradstreet, how are you?" A tall, powerfully built policeman, wearing his cap and jacket, was coming toward us along the stone corridor. "I should like to speak with you privately, Bradstreet." "Certainly. This way, please." We entered a small room resembling an office. A large ledger lay upon the desk, and a telephone hung on the wall. The inspector took his seat behind the desk. "What can I do for you, Mr. Holmes?" "I have come about the beggar called Boone, the man accused in connection with the disappearance of Mr. Neville St. Clair." "Yes, he was brought in and will remain in custody until the investigation is concluded." "I had heard as much. Is he still being held here?" "Yes, in a cell." "Is he behaving himself?" "Quite well enough, but he's a filthy brute." "Filthy?" "Yes. We could only persuade him to wash his hands. His face is black as a tinker's. Once the matter is settled, we shall give him a proper prison bath." "You would agree with me if you saw him." "I should very much like to see him." "Really? That's easily arranged. This way. You may leave your bag here." "No, I think I shall need to take it with me." "Very well. Let us go." We passed along the corridor and went downstairs. Opening a bar door, we descended a spiral staircase and reached a whitewashed passage with doors lining either side. "Third door on the right," said the inspector. "Here it is." He quietly slid open the small shutter in the upper part of the door and peered inside. "He's asleep at the moment," he said. "If you look through here, you can see him quite clearly." We both pressed our eyes to the opening. The man lay sleeping soundly, breathing heavily, his face turned toward us. He was of medium height, and his clothes, befitting his trade, were ragged and worn. His colored shirt protruded through the rents in his tattered coat. As the inspector had said, he was filthy from head to toe. Yet despite all the grime, the repulsive ugliness of his face was still plainly visible. An old scar ran from his eye down to his chin, then curved upward to lift the edge of his upper lip. Because of this raised lip, 3 of his teeth were exposed, giving him the appearance of a perpetual grin. His bright, tangled red hair fell over his forehead and down into his eyes. "Quite attractive, isn't he?" said the inspector. "He most certainly needs a good wash," replied Holmes. With that in mind, I brought the necessary equipment with me. As he spoke, he opened his valise and produced an enormous bath sponge, which surprised me greatly. Ah, you're a funny fellow," laughed the inspector. "Now, if you will open that door as quietly as possible for me, you will shortly see before you a man far more worthy of respect." "Why not?" replied the inspector. "He doesn't exactly seem suited to the cells of Bow Street, does he?" He slowly turned the key, and together we all entered softly. The man stirred slightly, but soon sank back into a deep sleep. Holmes bent over the pitcher, soaked the sponge, and then rubbed it twice vigorously across the man's face. "Gentlemen," he cried, "I have the honor of presenting to you Mr. Neville St. Clair. In all my life, I had never witnessed such a scene." The sponge had stripped the man's face as bark is stripped from a tree. The dirty brown discoloration vanished, the dreadful scar disappeared, and even the twisted lip that gave his face that repulsive grin was gone. With a sudden movement by Holmes, the man's tangled red hair also vanished. Sitting upright in bed before us was a black-haired, pale-faced, sorrowful-looking gentleman with smooth skin and refined features, rubbing his eyes in the stupor of sleep. Suddenly realizing that his secret had been exposed, he threw himself face down upon the pillow. "Good heavens!" cried the inspector. "It really is the missing man. I've seen his photograph." The man, resigned to his fate, turned toward us with an indifferent air and said, "So be it. Pray tell me, what am I accused of?" Smiling, the inspector replied, "Murdering Mr. Neville St. Clair? Come now, unless you attempted suicide, you cannot be charged in that manner. I've been a policeman for 27 years, but I've never seen anything like this. If I am Neville St. Clair, then there's no crime at all. In that case, I'm being unlawfully detained here. You have committed no crime, but your misconduct is serious," said Holmes. "You made the mistake of not trusting even your wife." "It's not my wife," "It's my children," the man groaned. "God help me. I never wanted them to be ashamed of their father. Now I shall be disgraced before the whole world. What can be done?" Sherlock Holmes sat down beside the man on the sofa and placed a friendly hand on his shoulder. "If this matter goes to court, your exposure will be inevitable. However, if you can convince the police that you have committed no crime, I see no reason why the affair should ever reach the newspapers. I am sure Inspector Bradstreet will carefully record your statement and forward it to the proper authorities. If that happens, the case will not go before a judge." "God bless you," cried the man joyfully. "Prison means nothing to me. I would even accept execution if necessary, but I cannot bear to have my family name stained or for my children to learn this filthy secret of mine. You are the first people to hear my story. My father was the headmaster of a school in Chesterfield, and I received an excellent education there. In my youth, I traveled extensively and took an interest in the theater. Eventually, I became a reporter for an evening newspaper in London. One day, our editor wished to publish an article about the city's beggars, and I volunteered for the assignment. That is how this adventure began. To write the piece properly, I saw no other option than to beg myself. Because of my theatrical background, I knew all the secrets of makeup, and I was well known backstage for my skill in applying it. The time had come to put that knowledge to use. I painted my face to create a scar, and by pulling one corner of my lip upward with a flesh-colored bandage, I made myself look utterly pitiful. With a red wig on my head and appropriate clothing, I chose a suitable spot in one of the city's business districts. I pretended to sell matches, but in truth, I was begging. After 7 hours, the amount I collected astonished even me. I wrote the article, and for a long time afterward the subject of begging left my mind. But some time later, due to a debt incurred by a friend for whom I had stood surety, an execution order for £25 arrived. I had no way of finding such a sum, when suddenly an idea occurred to me. I asked the creditor for a fortnight's grace, took leave from my job, and once again disguised myself and began begging. In 10 days, I had collected enough to pay off the debt. You can imagine how difficult it was to return to my old job for £2 a week when I could earn a fortune simply by painting my face and sitting there with my hat beside me. For a long time, I wavered between pride and money, but in the end, greed prevailed. I left journalism and took up begging full-time. My hideous face filled my pockets with coins. Only one person knew my secret: Lasker, the proprietor of the opium den on Swamdam Road. Every morning, I left that place as a wretched beggar and returned in the evening as a respectable gentleman. Since I paid him handsomely for the room I used, I felt certain my secret was safe. Before long, I realized that I had amassed a considerable fortune. I doubt that the average London beggar earns £700 a year, but my income exceeded even that, for I possessed abilities others did not. My skill with makeup, combined with my quick wit, soon made me well known throughout the city. Coins poured into my hat all day long. If I earned less than £2, I considered it a bad day. As I grew wealthier, my ambitions grew as well. I bought a house outside the city and eventually married. No one suspected my true occupation. My dear wife believed only that I worked in the city. Last Monday, just as I had finished my day's work and was dressing in my room at the opium den, I looked out the window and saw my wife staring straight at me. I was seized with terror and astonishment. I screamed in shock and covered my face with my hands, then ran at once to my confidant, Lasker, begging him not to let anyone upstairs. I heard my wife's voice above, but I was confident Lasker would not allow her entry. I quickly removed my clothes, put on my beggar's rags, painted my face, and donned my wig. Even my wife would no longer recognize me. But when it occurred to me that they might search the room and that my clothes could betray me, I rushed to the window in panic. In my haste, the wound on my finger, which I had cut that morning while in my bedroom, began to bleed again. I immediately took off my overcoat, which contained that day's earnings, and threw it into the river. The coat sank at once. I was about to throw the rest of my clothes into the river as well when I heard the sound of policemen running along the corridor and desisted. A few minutes later, I found it preferable to be arrested as the murderer of Neville St. Clair rather than be identified as Neville St. Clair himself. That is all I have to tell, because I wish to conceal my true identity for as long as possible. I never washed my face. Before my arrest, knowing my wife would be worried, I removed my ring unseen and entrusted it, along with a hastily written note, to Lasker, asking him to send it to my wife. That note arrived only yesterday, said Holmes. Good heavens! She must have endured a week like a nightmare. The police were watching Lasker, said Bradstreet. Since he could not send the letter himself, he must have given it to one of his sailor customers, who perhaps only just remembered to post it. That is undoubtedly the case, said Holmes, nodding. I have no doubt of it. But tell me, were you never investigated for begging? Many times, but the fines imposed were laughable compared to my earnings. Be that as it may, this matter must end here, said Bradstreet. If we are to suppress this affair, we must never hear the name Hugh Boone again. I swear with all my heart, upon my honor and dignity, that I shall never beg again. Then the matter ends here. But if you ever come before us again, we shall reveal everything. Take heed. We are indebted to you, Mr. Holmes, for shedding light on this affair. I only wish I knew how you solved the case. I solved it by sitting on 5 pillows and smoking a handful of tobacco. Watson, I believe if we make our way to Baker Street without delay, we shall arrive just in time for breakfast.